Hi, hello everybody. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
As you can see, we have lost our TV set. It has not been stolen. It's just have been moved to a different room. But otherwise, everything's fine. We're happy to see actually such a turnout today. Quite a few people. Thanks for sharing this Friday morning with us. And today we are going to be talking about
Design thinking.
design thinking,
And
whatever that might be.
yeah. Uh, yeah. Design thinking is, of course, a kind of a buzzword. We'll talk about that, but
How buzzy that is exactly, right?
absolutely. But the idea came to us from a project we're doing.
Yes,
And
we have not done. We'll probably share it once it's completed, but it's in the final stages of completion right now. It's well, we'll tell you all about this later. For now, as always, don't forget to wave your hands, arms in the air if you can hear us, or type a plus in the chat so that you can hear us.
Yep.
Yeah. This little interaction is actually meant for you to actually find the chat window. Don't forget it's there. Don't hesitate to comment, answer questions, ask questions as well as we go along. So as always, this session is being recorded, so if you have to drop off, it will appear on our YouTube channel. And if you want to share this breakfast or any other breakfast with your colleagues, you're very welcome to do so. Become a subscriber. To find this, just go on Google, type YouTube INTEA learning, and you'll find that pretty quickly. This session will also be there in a couple of days. Right. So speaking of buzzwords, right? These two amazing graphs kind of show the reason for why we actually decided to talk about this. Years ago, when we just started out, instructional design was all the rage. Everybody was like, "What is that?" We've actually had breakfast a few years ago on what's instructional design. It's been a topic of our training sessions with customers. It's gotten to a point where at least 1,000 books has been written on instructional design, and people sort of understood what that is, and it started fading out. At the same time, design thinking became this new big idea, not just in learning, or I would even say mostly not in learning, yeah. Right? Mostly in designing processes in large corporations, in government, in designing customer experiences and new products, in creating pretty much anything. And we thought, well, we're creating learning, so why don't we look at how design thinking, which is all the rage right now, as you can see from this graph, is applied to learning creation. Those graphs, if you want to be very technical, they are same scale, same time frame exactly, and how symmetrical they are, it actually blew my mind. I decided, like, let's Google those two, and this is obviously a replacement in a way. Or at least we want to think of it that way. Quick question: who is very sure that they know what design thinking is? Maybe you've Googled this before this breakfast, or maybe you've had a training on this. Maybe you read a book and so on. So type a plus in chat or a minus in chat if you know what design thinking is in principle.
We have one plus.
Yeah, Carolina. Carolina works at INTEA as the author of the design thinking course, or a co-author.
So she should be, when you've done the course, when you have created the course in design thinking, you should be knowing something.
Right. But, the course that we're talking about is called Design Thinking for Government by INTEA and Ilza Saloniece, who is an amazing expert, and we've actually stole a couple of slides of her for the end of this presentation. But generally, it's been a great inspiration to work with Ilse, and I think this is where the excitement actually comes from, right? It always, as when you learn new things, it comes from actual people who bring those things to you. So we're happy you're here with us. All right. What is design thinking process? Big question, and if you go and Google that, the answer is not very clear cut, I would say, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the charts, at least, one of my favorite things to find about new stuff is to go to Google Images. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a visual person, but typically, rather than reading through a ton of ads, I just go to Google Images, I look for something, and I find one slide that explains everything very succinctly. So this is what I did when I started thinking about design process. You get what I mean. And I found this one. It has 6 steps. The steps are pretty clear cut. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and implement. All right, we'll get into almost all of them. But then I found another one that actually has 5 steps, and then I found a few more where there could be 5 or 6 steps, but the steps are different. And then I found out that design thinking process actually goes in a circle, that it's a circular repeating process. Excellent. But then it became more difficult. It turns out that it does not circle the way you would expect it to circle. And this thing just blew my mind, and I gave up basically on trying to find a solution like that, because obviously there's more steps and the amount of interconnections between them is crazy. And whoever created this diagram obviously did not know what design thinking entails,
but this person was very strong in astronomy.
Yes, yeah, it looks a little bit like a solar system.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, something like that. All right, so that's that was a fail, and I decided to turn to authorities, and a huge authority on design is D-School. That's actually Stanford Design School, and they also have their own chart on design thinking, which has been re-implemented in many places. And this is like, if you want to find a chart and kind of read about this slide, this picture by D-School is probably the shortest, kind of the Twitter short version of what design thinking process entails. And I especially like this not necessarily linear apply as required.
As needed, yeah.
As needed, right. So let's talk about that. It reminds me of actually another thing of INTEA a little bit, right? It also has those kind of test and something phases in there. So yeah, this is a picture from the school. You can obviously see that it's a very cool design school if they have a black cab in the building and the cab is not even black, and obviously they're just showing off. Right. And they also have a great resource called Getting Started with Design Thinking, which is not for you to learn what design thinking is, but it's for design thinking trainers to explain what design thinking is. But it's still an amazing way to learn what it is. And it's open source. You can reuse it. You can access it entirely. It's, I think, about 90-minute activity, and I highly recommend that. So yeah, INTEA, do you remember INTEA? We definitely talked about this a couple of times. Does anyone remember what INTEA stands for?
Or at least, what is the A word?
Yes,
here?
right. What's the A word? Let's simplify this. So the INTEA, the process for learning design called INTEA, where does it begin? It begins with an A. What do you do when you begin?
Analysis.
Analysis. Who said?
Eva says it's analysis.
Okay. I'm just checking that it's not one of our colleagues, right?
Yeah.
So
they are supposed to know.
Yeah.
So
they're not writing. Sorry, listen. Right. So analysis, and I think that that's the biggest difference when you switch from any other creation or design model into design thinking model, it's that it does not start with analysis. At least it does not call it that way. Do you actually remember what it starts with? We've just shown you the model.
Yeah.
One slide ago. What does design thinking start with? And yeah, and this session is interactive. More interactive than last time, so wake up, guys.
No.
Okay, I'll give you a hint.
Right. Yeah,
it starts with empathy. It starts with the step where you empathize, and we really wanted to talk about this at quite a length, right? So it starts with empathize, and that is something that is both at the heart of the design thinking process and is unfortunately missing from a lot of other models which are very technical, and they aim and center around at the result of the product. A lot of design processes, they are driven by, let's say, the industry, sort of, the software industry has created a lot of models for creating stuff that's complex and needs to be produced rapidly and securely. And software industry is not known for empathy that much.
And what I find specifically valuable for learning situations, when you have to design something for learning or training, then we kind of say analysis, but let's be honest, most of the time we don't have so much to analyze. Very often we don't have data, we don't have time to gather data,
right?
Or our data is, we think we have data, but we do that from the point of view of assumptions. We assume that people are this, that they do this, that they need that. Whereas empathy, I think, is a much more powerful approach, because you are not you just try to imagine yourself in the shoes of that person, and that's more insightful than analysis based on no information.
Yes, that's actually a very good point. There are definitely techniques to how you show empathy, or rather get into somebody else's shoes, sometimes literally. And yes, analysis is very reliant on data, and when we don't have enough data, we actually go to analyze stuff where we actually have data, so we might end up analyzing the wrong thing just because it has data on it. And in the learning context, it means that instead of analyzing what learners do, you will analyze what the company does, right? Or what materials you have, because you have all the materials for creating a course, and you will look at those materials rather than at what materials are actually required. You will never look at the materials that aren't there, because how can you know that, and so on. So in empathizing, it also does not mean that you sit back in a chair and try to imagine the hard knock life of your employee, or of a partner, or of anyone in the audience. And number one is, of course, to actually go and talk to them, right? So instead of analyzing data, you go out and actually talk to people. Interviews mean that they are pointed at specific parts of the company. You talk with, let's say we're building a course on, give me an example.
Anything. Customer service.
Right. Let's say customer service, right? So who do you want to talk to? Probably you want to talk to, well, people who actually provide customer service, but also to customers, maybe.
Yeah.
In a way, or at least look into what customers have said previously. You might want to go ahead and talk to the managers of those people. You might want to see what other stakeholders there are in that process, because to provide great customer service, you probably need to use some sort of software, like logging complaints and so on. Maybe you use phone software or phone systems, and maybe there is a way how you gather this data, like maybe there's some website experience involved and so on. You want to talk to those people. So you start talking to people rather than analyzing, let's say, the amount of complaints and so on, which is still important. And in those interviews, you don't look for data as much as you look for stories and emotions. You find where people are frustrated. We spoke about emotions, right? Emotions are fear. Emotions are being unsure of what you're doing. Emotions are having fun with what you're doing, enjoying stuff. And you never ask people about their actual emotions, right? You don't ask them like, do you feel angry? Like, you ask them to tell a story, because if they remember a story, that story is obviously centered around emotion.
Yeah.
And then you try to fixate on that emotion and try to find out what that was, right? So there was one time when that guy came in and he pissed us off, like big time, and you start asking them, like, what did he do? What did you do? Why couldn't you do better? Why did he leave frustrated? So what couldn't have been done? And you try to find and uncover those things. You also might want to try to actually role play that, and that works for both content creation and actual course delivery as well. So, for example, if you think that well, our course will be delivered on mobile, and we've tested that it shows up and so on. But instead, go to the place of work of your learners and try to actually complete the course or a similar course in there. And you will find out that, for example, in the place where they work, they cannot listen to anything because they can't hear, it's too loud, or it's inappropriate to listen to something because it's too quiet. In a bank branch, for example, right?
Or you just cannot use headphones.
Or you cannot use headphones because it looks weird.
Company.
Yeah, something like that. Imagine the guy standing guarding something, right? And he has the earphone and he's listening to a course in there.
And this is, I think, where we see a clash of some of the traditional approach. When you would traditionally think of, okay, what kind of means of delivery would work? We need to have kind of, some people would like to listen to the course, others might like to watch the course, others would like videos, and you would be brainstorming those very good ideas. And when you go there and you see how it works down there, so many of your ideas just not needed or redundant.
Or let's say you go to their place of work and you find out that a 25-minute course, which you thought is a very short course, as compared to the initial 2-hour idea, is still too long, for example.
Right, absolutely.
Or it's too short because they actually have like maybe 3-hour breaks between some tasks where they can actually do more, but instead you're giving them the smaller pieces that are very cumbersome. Or things like internet is slow. We've had this customer with like an insurance company in Russia, which had branches everywhere from
Kaliningrad to Kamchatka.
Yes, and of course, in the bigger cities, they have great internet access, but in Kamchatka, like literally in one of the most remote parts of Russia, they might have terrible internet access. So when we were testing the course, we were actually testing not just for the fact that it actually opens and launches, but we were measuring times, how long it launches, and whether people get pissed off waiting for it to launch. And then we were optimizing things and then redoing things technically to actually make that experience of theirs easier. Because if you have to wait for 3 minutes for a course to load, and it's a very nicely designed course, there's videos and there's animations and there's a lot of useful stuff, but 3 minutes, nobody waits 3 minutes, and something swoops in, they forget about the course and they never return to it. So to avoid that, we actually had to go ahead and try that, create call them in there and ask how is it. And then speaking of experiences and getting into some of the shoes, that can be quite literal sometimes, right? So a couple of more examples probably on that. We had a very cool project with Luminor, it's a bank, and they did a course on stress management. Right?
The idea was that we worked with what is it? So, some internal surveys showed that the stress level was rising in the organization. So we were creating a course, or rather a campaign, on dealing with that, on helping people. And the idea it was a lot of things there. It was online part, offline part, and so on. But I think the very important part of it was that we were really trying to get into people's shoes, so to say. We were trying to build an experience where everything is easy, everything is very much reachable, and I would say not so much corporate, right? And the result was brilliant, because I think we, at least more than 50% of people got involved, and that was not a mandatory activity at all, but it was heavily marketed activity, with quite many people finishing the program, although the program does not assume that you have to finish,
Right.
you have the A and the Z.
You
pick and choose, you could pick some of the offline activities, some of the online activities. And the amazing thing was that it found so much interest in the audience, because we were addressing something they really needed, and we were addressing it in a way they could consume it. Right. So that was one experience. But that, of course, you're helping with stress management. The topic itself is very much personal. People want to engage.
It kind of calls for the empathetical approach.
Yeah. At the same time, another great client of ours, Swedbank, we're trying to apply that to compliance. And you would think of, okay, compliance, empathy, where do those two things cross? But they cross, because now what we're trying to achieve is we understand that the amount of compliance training is just huge.
Right.
We're talking in training weeks, I think, that you have to take every year, of course, not at once. And one of the very simplest ideas we're using is just testing out. We're saying that if you can prove your knowledge, you don't have to retake the course, which
requires a little bit of a battle with words.
Yeah, of course.
But still works. And again, because if we started to analyze that, we would say that, okay, well, here's the amount of compliance that you need, all the content that you need to know. Here are the problematic areas, right?
Content is hard to swallow.
So
it's boring.
Let's cut it up in chunks and so on. And we tend, when we analyze, we tend to analyze things that are here at hand. It's easy to work with the content. Sometimes, it's easy to work with previous course results, and so on. It's harder to work with people. They're not as readily available in many cases, and therefore you tend to focus on the wrong things. And we call you, or rather, design thinking process calls you to focus on the people. And one final very quick note: the third screenshot that you see,
the big one, with a teenager.
With a teenager, it's from a course for Swedish teachers who were involved into campaign to decrease youth smoking. And the whole course was actually centered around teaching teachers to get into the shoes of a teenager, because teenagers who smoke and teachers who try to stop them, they come from very different backgrounds, typically, right? Even if the age difference is not that huge, and you still remember your youth days and so on, your youth days could have been radically different from the people you're addressing now, simply because the backgrounds is different and so on. And the whole course was actually centered around empathizing with teenagers and not giving you the tools to just stop and catch them, but the tools to understand them and get in their shoes. Like it was amazing that most of the program was about empathy to the people you are essentially trying to stop and change, rather than giving you specific tools or anything, because that was apparently the more important part. We know that we just worked on the technical side of that program, not of that course.
No, actually, we wrote the script.
Really?
Really, yeah.
I'm confusing them.
Yeah, you're confusing it with another one. Yeah, we wrote the script.
Okay.
It was with our colleague Baiba, who's
Right.
yeah, those days.
That's
But
she's in Sweden, so that
yeah.
When you say the course came from Sweden.
Yeah. No. We created it in INTEA,
Right.
and so just to demonstrate how different the approach is, that if teachers start telling to the teenagers, you please don't smoke or smoking kills, it's absolutely counterproductive. It leads to an exactly opposite result. And the idea of this empathizing course, right? And some of the things we did were just really showing the life of a teenager, because a teacher who is not on Instagram doesn't know that the first encounter with a cigarette in the morning is in Instagram, where when you see somebody like Beyonce, putting a photo with a cigarette, and I'm just somebody So, and teachers don't know that. They think that tobacco marketing is banned. You cannot smoke at school. You cannot buy it without an ID. Although they kind of feel that their teenagers are safe, but they are not safe, because there is so much indirect marketing and so. But the idea of empathy can be used also on that level.
Okay. Final note on that. In terms of getting into somebody else's shoes, does anyone know what's happening in this picture? And I know you guys are not very keen on answering open-ended questions,
but
at least not this morning. But at least venture a guess, try and help us. So, who's that guy? What's he doing? What is going on in here? Is there a name for this? And actually, INTEA people don't know that, so you can also try and guess. Find that chat window even if you're on a phone.
That's a very hard question.
Hard question. Difficult audience. Difficult morning. Too cold. Anyhow, so what's
virtual reality or similar?
No. Or yes, in a way. So what's happening here? This thing that is on this person is called the old person suit, and it's a vest which is very heavy. It's a set of gloves which are very heavy. It's a set of boots which are really, really heavy. And it's a set of knee braces which do not let your knees work properly. And same thing for elbows, same thing for the neck, which you cannot turn that easily. He has headphones on, which make his hearing worse. And he has blurry glasses, which make his vision worse. That is a life of an old person. There's actually another picture of this guy with a cane and stooping, because this is what happens to you when the body does this to you. And people use that to try out different services in banks and governments and so on. And if you ever wondered, well, how does an old person feel visiting your bank branch? Well, you can actually don on this thing and then try for yourself and find out that those 3 steps that you never even thought about are actually there and not easy to navigate.
Or that form you asked him to sign, the letters are so small that it doesn't, or the kind of the distance from the person speaking to him is so long he doesn't hear much of what you're saying,
and so on and so on. So that's a great way to empathize with your audience on a very, very physical level, literally getting into their shoes. There is no young person's suit, I assume, but you can spend a week on Instagram and you'll be one, or TikTok these days. Instagram is for old people.
Again, first it's Facebook for old people, then it's Instagram. Now TikTok's next on the line.
Yeah, TikTok will be for old people in a year, I think. So yeah, anyhow, that's probably it about empathy. And you can also have similar simulations, not just physically, but also in the computers, right? Try and slow down your internet. Every browser has a feature now which allows you to slow the internet down. See how your learning feels now. Try and complete that course not on your fancy iPhone, But on a 90 € smartphone that some people might have in your organization, try and turn down make the images black and white and see if your graphs can still be readable, right? Think about all the accessibility and so on. There are guidelines for that. We can actually talk for a whole hour about accessibility, which is not a huge topic here for us, but for example, in some markets, it's very, very much mandatory, even for corporate. And yeah, you'll find a lot of new things. And again, long story short, get into somebody else's shoes rather than just analyzing, empathize. Here is another one, and the solar system one as well. Here's another huge difference between INTEA and design thinking process. And again, thank you for trying to participate in this conversation. Try and guess what's the difference between INTEA and design thinking process, and why I have chosen these particular charts to show you. So what's the weird, unusual stuff that you see on all four? Doesn't have to be a very elaborate answer.
Yeah,
probably one word will describe that. We'll give you a minute.
Assessment in the end.
No,
no.
INTEA actually has
INTEA is linear, and these have exactly. INTEA kind of assumes that
you start with analysis,
and you're always right.
Design,
you're always right,
yeah.
And so on. Every step is a success in itself, and we can go ahead, which is, of course, never happens like that.
Yes, so a huge part of design thinking is assuming that you will have to go around in circles between steps. You will have to return to previous steps, and it's a normal part of the process. At INTEA, I think there is a breakfast about how we produce learning, and one of the metaphors that we used was the train. Every course gets onto a train and moves from analysis and content creation to design, and then into development, then into implementation, quality assurance, into evaluation at the end. And sometimes you see INTEA works in circles, so you evaluate, and then you go into analyzing to build again. And then there are some INTEA models where evaluation sits in the middle, so you do analysis, development, design, implementation in circle, but you always jump into analysis in between. But that is actually where people are trying to shoehorn INTEA into design thinking, because real life calls for something else. Real life does not work in linear processes. It requires you to jump back and forth and return to previous steps with better ideas and so on. Again, the way how you do that from these graphs can be pretty much anything, but I think the big takeaway when you start applying design thinking to your processes is that you allow yourself, you set this expectation of that you will have to go back, because otherwise you might feel that going back is a a failure. It's a problem. We have analyzed and empathized. We have created ideas. We have created a prototype, and then we've tested it, and normally we need to go into actually building it, but no, now we have to go back to step one. What? That's a setback, right? That's a problem. We did not account for that in time planning, right? Or your boss might ask, like, what? You're back at that step again? You're doing another prototype? Guys, that's the third prototype or something. So you have to set expectations when you apply design thinking. And the great thing about design thinking is that it allows you to do so. When you announce at the beginning of the project, this thing will be guided by the design thinking framework. You kind of announce to everyone that yes, we'll go in circles a little bit, and that's all right. However, there is a fine difference between going back to a certain step to kind of check your bearings and then move on, and just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So you want to avoid actually getting stuck in a time loop. Speaking of movie references, and you want to actually have the progress in there. How to really achieve that is a huge topic in design thinking training. Since we're not doing design thinking training, we're just trying to expose you to the differences between our normal mindsets and this newer, more popular mindset. We will not go in depth, but there's a method to madness, I would say. And yeah, remember that apply as needed from the D school. Again, you don't have to do that jump back all the time, right? You just have to be prepared for that, and you have to allow yourself to do that and not feel like you're stuck or this is a failure or something. So that's another huge difference, I think, between typical process and design frameworks and design thinking, right? Because thinking is never linear as well, right?
Yeah.
When you start thinking about something, you go in those circles around stuff until it kind of crystallizes into something useful. Right. So just to touch upon other parts real quick, right? And we will not go into every part specifically. But what I wanted to say is that every step of the way there is a person, there is a human at the center of everything. So when you test, for example, you do not test the technology, right? We always say like test, right? You decided to do a mobile learning, test that it works, right? You decided to allow people access from home, test that it works like that. You decided, anything else, to use videos or animations or to make a very short course, test. But we typically talk about technologies, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about prototypes and testing. But like with that Kamchatka example, you also have to think about people, right? So what's their experience with this new thing, and how do they feel about that, right? So you don't not only look at the kind of server load, but also on the human load as well. So to say. Yeah, so I would say that's the third takeaway from this. The first was to empathize. The second one is to
embrace
the looping.
Yeah.
And this one is that at every step, there's a human at the center. It's a very human-centered approach. Right. Now let's talk actually about why design thinking, because now hopefully you understand kind of the flow. It's not radically different in actual steps. You still start with ideas, get to something tangible, and then you implement it and see what happens. It's just that the mindset about this is different from what we usually assume when we create something. So why design thinking? This is actually the part that we took from Ilse. So again, huge credit to Ilse Salniece. If you need to sell this approach to your management or to your colleagues next time you build a project around that, and it's especially important for larger projects, which not just another course like we've done a million times before, but bigger projects that are aimed at changing things and so on. So there are a couple of things which you can mention to them. So first of all, design thinking actually motivates you when you feel down, right? Sometimes you feel that it's all about technicalities, it's all about the technology, it's all about the processes and guidelines. You're building compliance, and you are neck deep in European regulations and specific industry normative documents, and you feel demotivated, and you feel like, well, how can people even live like that or something like that? And design thinking actually allows you to remember that you're doing this to make somebody's life better, and you can actually talk to them and allow yourself to actually talk to them and ask them, well, how would your life improve, and start from that end rather than from the end of, oh my God, I have this amount of content to
How
fit
do I
to fit into
yeah.
this amount of free time that
Yeah.
we can allow for learning. So yeah, it actually, I think, is a very motivating approach. Another thing is that when you, like I said, when you announce that, this project, we'll try a new approach, we'll work with design thinking. So let's kick it off with a little design thinking workshop, and let's talk about this. You actually give yourself a permission to change a lot of things about that, to change the approaches. One thing, you allow yourself to say, okay, we will be going back. We will do multiple prototypes. We will do interviews. We will invite stakeholders. We will use, in design thinking, there is this double diamond framework. You might want to Google that at some point.
It's kind of it's the next level.
It's the next. It's when you actually are trained on how design thinking actually works, and there's this idea of thinking wider and then narrowing down, and then thinking wider again and then down. So there's a whole new way to think about things, and you give yourself a permission to actually do that when you say, okay, we have this new approach. Another huge part of design thinking is that it's very egalitarian. When you invite people to interviews or to brainstorming is a huge part of design thinking. They have to kind of leave their titles behind, and you can talk, like, everyone has the same level of voice at the table, right? If you are just the basic entry-level employee, or you have been with the company for 40 years, or you have a PhD in this, and
or just the mindset. I think an important part of mindset is that we at Learning and Development, we treat SMEs as clients. So very often it's them coming with certain ideas and certain expectations and certain wishes.
Driving the process.
Yeah. We definitely need to have 30 questions in the end of the course to test the knowledge. Right. Why? I mean, they have not done any design thinking before. Right. They have maybe done some analysis, but most probably they just have an assumption that this is the right way to go. So just telling everybody, now it will be design thinking, which means this, and that, everybody forget about your roles, forget about your positions. Let's
forget about this. We need to train them to
or we need to test them, or we need to sell to them.
It just, helps you assume this more open-minded position, and again, you can always do that with any kind of framework, but announcing that you're doing DT is
it has this marketing edge.
Right. Another part is that design thinking calls for cross competencies in teams, so it gives you permission to invite people that you would probably not invite otherwise. I've been to a conference where T-Mobile is that was in the United States, so it's a telecom operator, and they said that they actually got permission to hire a data analyst for their team, like a guy who goes around the learning world within T-Mobile and plugs in data points everywhere, collects data and analyzes it. And we don't do enough of that, and we don't allow ourselves to do enough of that. So, for example, just to give you an example, they have a course where they used to have voiceover for slides. So not just reading the slides, but you can also click and listen to the slides. And they found out that not just maybe some 20% of people use this voiceover, and that goes beyond accessibility, people with disabilities, because they use different tools to read slides. That like 1 in 5 people uses this at all, but also the average length of the voiceover was under 20%. So it's 1/5 of 1/5 of the
4%.
impact. Yeah, like 4% of the impact for the whole money spent on actually doing voiceover, maintaining that, imagine changing a text on the slide versus changing a word in recorded audio and so on. You cannot just tell that from looking at the learning management system, right? Or asking people, because if you ask people, do you use voiceover? Statistically, people who use voiceover will say yes to that question.
Others will just not answer.
Exactly. Like, I don't use voiceover. Why would I even answer that? Or, some of them will, but, the data will be skewed and you will never know. Well, if they do use voiceover, is it like once per course on every slide, maybe once in their lifetime and so on. So by, plugging the data collection points in there and actually looking at that, help them to redistribute budgets in a proper way. And you can come up with a ton of things like that. Like when people do that, when people do their learning, like you distribute something to 5,000 people, you expect at least 3,000 people to complete this, and instead you get 1,000. So why does it happen? Maybe you want to look at when they learn, correlated with something, and find out that they actually all learn on weekends for whatever reason. And it turns out that a lot of people can't do that, but that's the only slot for this job role and so on. And again, just looking at the completions in the LMS will not give it to you. So you want to invite a specialist like that. And that is just one example of cross competencies that you want to do.
I mean, you can always, I think it's always very interesting when we learning people talk, for example, to marketing people or social media people,
right?
Because they challenge a lot of what we're doing,
right?
Because they're like, come on, we have attention span of like 2 seconds. What is this?
Or this is boring.
This is boring.
Not catchy.
Not catchy.
Like, remember, we have like what 2 or 3 breakfasts devoted to selling and marketing your learning to your own employees. So
how about we invite somebody who really knows how to do it?
Yeah, something like that, right? Or we at INTEA, I remember we invited.
We invited a theater director.
I was trying to come up with the right word. So a director. So somebody who actually is a creative person and influences people with spoken word, essentially through.
But the idea was that basically when we said we are writing learning scenarios, learning scripts. The guy is writing scripts for drama. So probably there is something we can learn from him. And that was an amazing insight. I think we had a 2-hour discussion and we're still quoting him when we're working on certain scripts. So cross competency.
It's a huge part of design thinking. And when you announce DT, you allow yourself to do it. Okay, to wrap this up, one last point that really stuck with me, that is really missing from every other framework that I've seen before. But to get to that, I want to ask you a question. So do you know this word?
Kind of our interactions with the audience today, they demand
or like tough crowd.
Tough crowd,
Right. So help us here. Try and guess. Or, with the amount of time it takes you can even Google it twice. But
I mean, with
triskaidekaphobia.
I mean, with just fear of words composed of 3 components or something like that.
Excellent guess. Excellent guess, because obviously it's a phobia and there's obviously a 3 in there, but no, not exactly. Number 30? Almost there.
Over there. It's not 30.
It's 13.
Times 10, it's 13.
It's 1-3. So it's the irrational fear of number 13, and it's a real thing, and it impacts our world. And people who fly planes don't like to sit in row 13, and therefore some companies decided, let's not have a row 13, and that is something incredibly rational. If you ask an engineer to build a plane, he will build a plane with all the rows in it. Skipping this is silly. If you ask him, like, can we do that, he will say, well, this is stupid. And it actually I have a whole system of, assigning numbers to rows, and now you're breaking my system. That is stupid. And then imagine building a house or something where and then coming to somebody and saying, okay, we need to skip this one, and he said, well, I've already built it, right? So what do you want to do? And then you come up with this 12a part and so on. It's something annoying and irrational to a lot of very rational people, which we always tend to be. But the fact of life is that people are not rational, and design thinking puts people at the front of things. And that means embracing the irrationalities as well when you're designing stuff, because if you want people to enjoy using that, you also
I can give you an example.
Come on.
We once had, it was almost 10 years ago, we had a course that had the save button.
Save button, yes.
To save the progress, because we figured out that people are afraid that their progress is not saved,
right?
And we cannot explain to a learner that it is being saved automatically
all the time, right?
So given the audience analysis and discussions with the audience, we figured out we need that button. The button did nothing, it only clicked,
right?
But everybody was happy. You understand that
Yeah.
there's a button that's saved. It just, button you click and it doesn't do anything because the process is separate, right? But it's again, it's this row 13 kind of thing. But
yeah,
you have to do that.
And the way they say in the army, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, it what actually blew my mind out of everything that I've read about design thinking, it's that, hey, people are irrational, and if you want to build good products for them, good processes, good learning content, if you want to address them, you have to address their irrationalities as well, and kind of to embrace them. And we all know where it went. That we often don't do that, and we all know where it went wrong about 2 years ago. And we know that every conversation for the past 2 years starts with the pandemic and whatnot. But that's really true. A lot of people who are designing processes aim to combat the spread of the COVID virus. They assume that everyone is absolutely rational.
Yeah.
And we aren't. And I'm not rational. And I've had doubts. And I waited out, and I seeked out certain types of communication to make my decisions, which are never based on the whole entirety and the sum of all truth. It's still based on some of your previous assumptions. So when you communicate to people, do not just assume that the fact that they, for example, like everyone in your company speaks English, right? So that's a requirement, they all do. So when we communicate to them in English, they all understand that. Yeah, but if it's not their native language, they might just brush off some messages.
Or I mean, we assume that people believe that learning kind of fosters their careers. I'm not sure that you will have 100% yes on that question.
Come on, even worse. We need to remember that people do not learn, like we assume that people learn stuff from what we tell them, but they also learn stuff from other media.
Yeah, we are not alone.
Yeah, and when we are explaining something to them about whatever environment or sustainability or safety, like digital safety or physical safety and so on, they have stuff that they can be superstitious. If your process for checking something requires them to go back once they've locked the door, they will want to look in the mirror, if you know that kind of superstition. Something like that. You have to just understand that here's an elevator which misses the floor 13, and assume the building misses the floor 13.
Or there is a secret floor.
Yeah, could be like a technical floor. Sometimes they actually do that.
Yeah.
But here is just, I think this is essentially the last content slide. What's wrong with this? And thank you, Artem, for and Uliana and everyone else who participated for being the participant. So maybe you'll help me out here. So what's wrong with this one? Other than it misses floor 13, what else? Yeah, it misses number 4. You know what? It also misses number 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, no 2, it's because it's a technical flaw, I assume, but there is no 4, there is no 14, and if you're really careful, you'll see that this thing up top is 27, so 24 is missing as well if you count it carefully. So there's number 4 anywhere in this 50-story building. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Why is that, and where is this picture from? It's from a particular city that I've been to. And
China. Yeah, words like 4.
Excellent. Yeah. 4 means death in China. Absolutely correct. And therefore, if you have a lot of Chinese people, you want to avoid that. That picture is amazingly from Vancouver, which has about 50% of Asian population. And I've just been there and noticed that. And yeah, really, 4s are missing in the elevators. That's absolutely amazing.
I mean, 4s for the Asian population, 13 for the probably European European descent population. So everybody's accounted for.
What else, right? So you do that if you want to be, human centric. There's probably a limit to
what you can do,
to what you want to do, because you don't want to just feed into this kind of stuff. You want to bring some rationality into conversation as well, but you have to be aware of that at least. And design thinking demands that you actually do that, and that results in way better outcomes than just assuming that everyone is 100% rational, and that people will always, if something is cheaper, people and of same quality, people will buy that, right?
Look at Apple.
Yeah, like decrease the price on any product. You might find that people say, "Well, what
will buy more?" No, they can buy less because they'll think that it's a dodgy product.
It's so dodgy. Cheap. It's too cheap. It's expiring, maybe, right? Maybe it's stolen. Yeah, try to sell your car for like $100, and I say you'll get the first call from police. So yeah. With that, that's actually. Oh yeah, I actually have another picture, a bigger one, right? So look at this one. It has 13, 14 missing. What's 24 is missing. 34 is missing as well. Yeah. And 4 is missing between 3 and 5, although 2 is there. So yeah, that's another elevator from Vancouver. That's absolutely crazy. So yeah, on that irrational note, we thank you and we wish you a Merry Christmas, because this is the last breakfast this year. And we'll return in January. And if you remember this movie, do you remember this movie? Then yeah, to us you're always perfect, even when you're irrational,
or you're not answering in chat,
or because it's a busy morning, it's a cold day, and you have to get a lot of things done before Christmas, right? So we'll give you 5 minutes back. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to us everywhere. Look for us on YouTube. This is another movie. This is Pollock by Ed Harris, by the way. And see you in January. Have amazing holidays. Get some rest in, and see you. Thanks.
See you. Bye-bye.